We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the Monday Mashup. I'm your host, Robert Phoenix, and it is 10 o'clock here on the left coast, the Pacific coast of the United States, where we seem to be on the front lines of just about everything, including waves of radiation coming at us from Fukushima, Japan. We're going to be talking a little bit about radiation today and what's going on in Fukushima, and also what's happening here in this country excuse me, in terms of cases of cancer, which seem to be rising dramatically. I'm going to be talking about thyroid cancer, and there is a dramatic increase in thyroid cancer. And doctors are having a very hard time trying to pin down what might be the cause of thyroid cancer or the uptick in thyroid cancer. Recently, Argentina's President Cristina Fernandez had her thyroid removed for what doctors thought was a cancerous nodule. And after the operation, they learned that it was not cancerous. So we're going to be exploring that a little bit later. Something happy and positive to look forward to as the show progresses. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Martin Luther King Day, what Martin Luther King meant, what he means now, and some of the things you may or may not know about Martin Luther King. Hate to pop your bubble on it, but Martin Luther King was not the guy that a lot of people paint him out to be. But then again, most martyrs aren't anyway. But first, and most importantly, more than anything else, the first topic I'm going to talk about today is the San Francisco 49ers. And I know people out there like, oh no, he's going to talk about sports. He loves sports. Why is he talking about sports? So let me tell you why I'm talking about sports, and let me tell you why I'm talking about the San Francisco 49ers, okay? First of all, I've got sports hardwired into my astrological chart. I've got Jupiter in Sagittarius in the first house, and it trines Uranus, which is up in my ninth house. I was born with sports in my astrological DNA. It's just the way it is. I played them fairly well, not well enough to play at a high level and but I was more than competent, trust me, when it came to sports. More than competent. I've played thousands of pickup games of basketball, many places. I was kind of a pickup basketball gypsy for a while. But anyway, I love sports. I find it reprehensible sometimes. I think it can be one of the worst LCD cultures known to man. It can be flat out jingoistic and bring up the worst in us. It could also be used to aggregate and organize people in ways that their volition and their will are utterly manipulated. In short, sports can be mind controlled. I'm not going to mince any words around it. We look at events like the Olympics or the World Cup or the Super Bowl. There's a lot more going on with those events than just what's happening on the surface. Case in point, Janet Jackson and the nipple malfunction or the wardrobe malfunction. Clearly, an event that had, in some ways, very dark metaphysical repercussions, but also think about what that meant for millions of children and parents watching the Super Bowl. It was no wardrobe malfunction. And what happened was, as a result of that, was that they plugged in after that the 7-second rule. So everything is delayed now. Not just sporting events, but everything is delayed. That 7-second delay between the broadcast and what we see is significant. There's a lot that can happen in 7 seconds. Trust me on this. A lot. Especially if you wanted to alter reality just slightly. So there's a real shadow side of sports. And the other shadow side of sports is that somebody invariably loses. And there's a great deal of emotional energy, a maelstrom of energy that's whipped up during these events. And, there are a number of channeled sources from, other dimensions, other planets, other stars. And to a T, they almost all say that sporting events are like troughs, like psychic troughs for these energies to feed off of. Okay. So I've gotten into the dark side of sports. But Saturday, with the San Francisco 49ers, and I experienced this to some extent with the Giants, so I'm not as much of a Giants fan as I am a 49er fan and a football fan. Saturday was a day and an event that was utterly unique for me in many respects. The 49ers played the Saints. It was a playoff game. The Saints were the much-hyped Saints. And they have a quarterback by the name of Drew Brees, one of the best in the game. They've got a supersonic passing attack. They scored more points than any other team. The experts were picking the Saints. It was the first 49ers playoff game in, I think it was 9 years. It was the first, 2003 was, 2002 was the last 49er playoff game. 2003, my bad. So what is that? 8 years, 9 years? 9 years. 9 years. 9 years since the 49ers have been in the playoffs. And there's a rich history with the 49ers being in the playoffs. Their stadium is the oldest stadium in the country. It basically sits on a swamp adjacent to the San Francisco Bay at high tide. It gets incredibly mushy on the field. It has probably the worst bathrooms in the United States as far as stadiums go. The concessions are not great, and they're overpriced. The seats, however, are cheap, fairly cheap ticket prices. Sightlines aren't terribly great, but it's the stick. That's what they call it, the stick. And on Saturday, the Saints traveled to the stick. And the 49ers are coached by Jim Harbaugh, who is a Capricorn. He's an early Capricorn. I believe he's born 23rd of December. He's got a stellium in Capricorn. And I would equate Jim Harbaugh to William Wallace. And William Wallace, of course, is Braveheart. Mel Gibson, also, interestingly enough, a Capricorn. And one of the things that Harbaugh has done to this team is he's preached nothing but the team. And I've watched him. He's truly an exemplar of holding space, having a vision, and bringing everybody up to the level that he is actually seeing where things can go with the team. So he's a Capricorn that's already on the top of the mountain, and he's bringing everybody up. And I've seen this throughout the season. You know, I've watched a lot of coaches, and coaches can be some of the most manipulative bastards on the planet. I've played for coaches that, quite frankly, made my stomach turn. Jim Harbaugh is not one of those guys. I mean, he is a high-character individual who stresses family and work ethic and the blue-collar mentality, and his team has totally bought in. And he came in and he took over a team that was just, the franchise was just moribund. They were terrible. The culture of the franchise was terrible. The last guy who coached there couldn't coach a high school team to a victory. Maybe he could, but maybe not more than 3 in a season. It was terrible. And Harbaugh came in, and in a short season, this is important to understand, in a short season, they had very little training camp. He had never had these players before. This was all new to him and his coaching staff. They went out and they won 13 out of 16 games. They beat the vaunted Saints. And they didn't just beat them. It was the most emotional game I've ever seen. It was a testimony of coming back and playing hard and in rising to the occasion. And I was at a pub in Walnut Creek, and I got to tell you, it was the closest to a collective mind I've ever experienced. It was pretty remarkable, and it was just absolutely remarkable. And to a person, everybody is talking about this event here in the Bay Area. It was life changing, and in some ways, it was life changing. And the reason it was life-changing was because, for me, what this guy and what this team has done is that they have shown what focus, what determination, what a real familial, and this is what Harbaugh talks about, the team is a family. What's funny about Harbaugh is that nobody exists outside of the family. I mean, it's really kind of interesting, and you can make your illusions like nobody exists outside of the organization or the group, but he really has some very defined boundaries, and those boundaries are paying off in dividends in a big, big way. And he's fierce. He says, "We take no quarter, we give no quarter." There is something to be learned from this. Something to be learned. There are lessons around organization and preparation and working with people together in a way that is rewarding, that everybody gets to experience greatness. And that's really what they're working on in this, mediated environment known as pro football. It's a very different vibe than when the Giants won in 2010 when they won the World Series. That was a team of misfits and cast-offs. And there was an interesting lesson to be learned from that as well, in that in any situation, when you get the right group of people together who have the right intention and believe in one another, greatness can occur. And that's what we saw with that Giants team. Synergy is a term that I would use for both teams, but the synergy is slightly different. And at the top of the heap here for the 49ers is a guy by the name of Alex Smith. And Alex Smith was the first-round pick of the NFL draft in 2000, and I think it was 3 or 4. I think it was 2004. And Alex Smith has not only just underachieved, but he's been tarred and feathered. He's made a ton of money. He's a huge amount of money for playing for 2 different coaches who threw him under the bus. And the fan base here has derided him repeatedly. And Alex Smith has had 2 opportunities to leave this team and go somewhere else. Most people, myself included, probably would have taken that as a sign and say, "I'm out of here." But there was something about Alex Smith that said, "You know what? I am not going to cut and run. I'm going to stay." And Jim Harbaugh saw part of himself in Alex Smith. And he said, "I'm going to take this kid, and I'm gonna love him. I'm gonna love him. I'm gonna coach him up, and I'm gonna turn him into the player that he needs to be." And there are so many lessons here, and I think one of the great lessons in this is that there are people around us who are forgotten. That life has dealt them serious blows. Sometimes maybe they're lessons that they needed to learn. Okay, I mean, let's just say maybe Alex Smith needed to have some form of humiliation at the hands of Mike Nolan. Maybe he needed that. Maybe he needed it to make him tougher, more resilient. We can't discount these things. But I'm going to tell you that there are people out there, there are people around you, there are people in your life that are like Alex Smith. And all they need is some attention and some focus and some mentoring and some coaching up and some love, and they are capable of exceeding theirs and others' expectations, no matter how limited of them. So this is one thing I'm taking away from this experience, is how Jim Harbaugh has literally raised Alex Smith up by his bootstraps through technique, through coaching, and most importantly, belief. Jim Harbaugh has never wavered that Alex Smith is an elite quarterback. And he would say this, and people would laugh. And say, are you kidding me? Drew Brees, he's elite. Aaron Rodgers, he's elite. Well, guess what? Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers both got beat on Saturday and Sunday. And who's going to the NFC Championship games? Alex Smith. So there's something in there for us to understand. And if not, for other people, for ourselves, that we are both Jim Harbaugh and we are both Alex Smith. And that it's up to us to find that part of Alex Smith inside of ourselves and believe in it without fail. Without fail. And think about you in your life right now. Think about you and your life and your conditions in your life, no matter how limited they may be. And I know a lot of the people that hang out in the chat room or go to my website, I know a lot of their stories. And there are people that are struggling right now, struggling to keep their noses above water, struggling to make ends meet and to have meaningful relationships, to find meaningful work at a time where unmeaningful work is looking like El Dorado to a lot of people, okay? So I guess what I'm saying is we're all Alex Smith in some way, shape, or form. But we're all also Jim Harbaugh as well. We're all also Jim Harbaugh as well. Let me see what's going on here with my chat room. When somebody calls me, here's that thing about achievement. So what I'm saying around all this is that we have to nurture our dreams. We have to nurture the Alex Smith. We can't stop believing in who we are. It's vital. And if you know somebody in your life, that is like an Alex Smith, and you have the opportunity to really focus and say, you know what, I believe in this person. Do it. Why not? What's it going to cost you? A little time, a little energy. Use your discernment. You don't want to get into fix-it mode with people. It's hard. But sometimes when you've got the psychic or maybe the material or the emotional luxury, you can do it. You can do it. And the other thing that is, to me, again, we're living in a time where Pluto and Capricorn is breathing down our neck. I mean, look, we live in serious times, ladies and gentlemen. I don't want to underscore that. Serious times. And yet, I'm watching this Capricorn, Jim Harbaugh, assemble a tribe, an army, a group of people, a family, whatever you want to call it, with such devotion and such synergy that it's actually really inspiring, which is why I'm sharing it with you today. Now, can it be an asshole and a jerk? Of course it can. But I don't know too many people that aren't truly successful that have a little bit of asshole and jerk in them. I'm not excusing it, it's just the way it is. We can't, we do this dance with our egos, and we find the right relationship to our egos. So what does it mean? No, it means that there's probably a lesson there that we got to get organized. And I mean, I'm not talking about, going out and starting a militia. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can talk to people in your neighborhood. You can talk to people about what's going on and really get into issues that are impacting you. And the biggest issue that is impacting people right now, I'm going to tell you right now, is Agenda 21. You've got to find, if you haven't figured out Agenda 21, you got to look at it. I'm trying to get this woman on the show on Friday. I sent her a request for an interview, and she is taking on I believe she's in Santa Rosa. She's up in what we call, Sonoma County, Napa County, that area, the Lost Coast. She's up there, and I'm trying to get a hold of her. And she's been taking on the local city council with the Agenda 21 stuff, and ICLA, and all these things. So basically, what she's uncovered, I'm going to try to find some more information on her. Essentially, what she's uncovered is that there's going to be there's a huge amount of funding, and I've actually already covered this in other shows, but there's a huge amount of funding. Here it is. It's near riot breaks out of California Delphi meeting, which is kind of interesting. The woman's name is Rose Coyer, Koire, and she is the executive director of the Post Sustainability Institute.org and Democrats Against UN Agenda 21.com and Santa Rosa Neighborhood Coalition.com. And essentially what she's uncovered, and I've talked about it before, is that the Department of Transportation has allocated $200 billion for the San Francisco Bay Area over the next 25 years. Okay. Now, one of the other things that she's uncovered is that there is this group called One Bay Area. And if you don't know about where I live, it's called the Bay Area. And it's a regional plan. And One Bay Area is basically been organized to break down boundaries and forward Agenda 21. One of the things that she's uncovered in a pretty interesting PDA, it's called a Priority Development Area. So it's a PDA. Well, this is what PDF. So the PDA is what she's uncovered. Is that Northern California is considered one of the 11 mega regions in the U.S. And it includes 31 counties, obviously, 48,000 square miles, 15 million people, and get this, part of two states, California and Nevada. So there's already this very covert movement taking place to eliminate statehood and create these boundaries. Now, if you've been following my blog, you've been following the radio show, I've talked about the Hunger Games. And the Hunger Games, the United States is broken down into 13 regions or 13 states. And here we're talking about 11, the magical 11. So the 11 mega regions, and here we've got California and part of Nevada being one of them. They've got $200 million allocated from the Department of Transportation, but only for counties or cities that are playing along with ICLA, Agenda 21, and this whole, green illusion. And if you don't play, you don't get the money, which means you don't get your roads fixed. You get none of that. You get none of the perks by saying we don't want to do this. None of the perks. So one of the things that they have during these, this is called, it's a Delphi meeting. And these people stormed it. And one of the things that they did is they spoke out, they videoed everything. They entered the meeting without signing in. During these meetings, they break the groups up. They break the group up into subgroups, and they have facilitators that do these consensus things, and they're always leading people. Consensus, if you're not familiar with consensus, you basically rule out this whole concept of majority rule. In consensus, almost always, and I've been a part of consensus, it almost always drifts down into the kind of lowest common denominator. And it takes off the top and it takes off the bottom, and it finds a really muddy middle. And what happens is that these people will go and they will actually tamp down any kind of dissenting point of view and continue to kind of engineer and morph the already pre-decided outcome of where they want to take their decision. Okay? So here's what else they did. They continually corrected the government consultant lies and called them out. They didn't participate in the phony voting. They didn't give their names out to the establishment press. They brought in cameras and signs. They flyered warning the organizers not to violate the open meeting laws and did not get arrested, although the police were called. Now, it sounds to me like these people are, quote-unquote, terrorists. I mean, they're disruptive, right? So who are they? They're a coalition of independent citizens from all over the Bay Area, property rights advocates, Tea Party members, Republicans, Libertarians, non-affiliated independents. So if you want to know what you can do, you go out to these local meetings and you get involved in this whole Agenda 21 regime, because what they're doing is they're reshaping America at a local level, and people don't even know it. Right before our very eyes. Right before our very eyes. So let me just break down the PDA, and then we're going to move on to another topic here. So the PDA, which is a priority development area, is a so-called transportation corridor. So it's usually a busy street with a bus line or a train station nearby. The PDA can be as small as half a block or as large as a square mile. All the projected new population for the next 25 years will be accommodated by housing within this designated area, the PDAs. No other developments, no other housing developments will be approved for the next 25 years, where the city will not get their piece of transportation funding. So if the city approves a housing development by a major builder, like say Pulte or whatever, they don't get their funding. Everything now must be concentrated within the PDA, and the PDA is going to be city blocks or a square mile. And this is what's happening. And what will happen now, and this is what big bold letters. And she says, do you see what this will do to property values outside of the specific PDAs? It will destroy them. Do you see what this does to individual cities? It destroys their sovereignty. I mean, think about that. If you're outside of a PDA, you're in a wasteland. You're not going to get any services. You're not going to get any improvements. Who's going to want to live there? People are going to want to live in the PDA. That's where everything's happening, right? You want to get a return on your house, if you can even own your house, that's where it's going to be. So I didn't really plan on talking about this, but I think it's a really good place to start, because we don't have to organize and get violent. We can organize on a local level and really be on the front lines of this whole Agenda 21 movement, which I think is sneaky, really sneaky. I got a really good friend who is LEED certified. And she's proud to be LEED certified. She had all this work to be LEED certified. And essentially what she is, she's an ambassador for Agenda 21. And I hate to break her heart on this, because, she said to herself, I can't believe in anything, but I can believe in the earth. I can believe in the earth. The earth is limited. The earth has resources that we need to protect, environments we need to protect. That is an immutable truth that I can wrap my head around. And it's not. I mean, yes, there are those things, But that's exactly what these people are preyed upon, is the fact that you care about the earth. You care about the earth, we're going to manipulate your care. It's the way it is. Even the sports thing, and so there's filled with manipulation. But look, I find inspiration where I can, and that's my right. I find inspiration where I can. Is it always pure? No, not always. Is it flawed? Sure it is. But it's up to me to make something out of it. That's my alchemical right as a human to turn lead into gold, and I didn't have to try very hard on Saturday. And it was a very interesting time on Saturday. A very interesting time. I'd had a really rough night the night before, super rough night, hard, dealing with dark psychic forces, and I was really jagged on Saturday. And a buddy of mine was going to come over, pick me up, and we're going to go out to this pub out in Walnut Creek. And there's a message board that I participate in. It's all 49er fans, but interesting people, and a lot of different stripes, a lot of different backgrounds, different countries. We talk about more than just football. There's a lot of interesting things that go on that site, and I've hung out with them, certain people on that site, maybe once a year or twice a year, depending on what's going on with the team. And so I've gotten to know them a little bit offline. And I just put it out there, hey, anybody want to get together on Saturday? And this 80-year-old former detective from the Central Valley, who's now almost legally deaf, beautiful guy, James, said he wanted to go. His wife, of course, would accompany him. She goes everywhere he does, and they travel a lot and fish. They're incredible people. So they decided they wanted to go. Another guy wanted to go. Another guy wanted to go. And I brought my friend, a buddy, and it was actually a great, just a great event. I mean, the place was absolutely packed, and we had this one table in the front area of this pub. It was up like a patio area, closed-in patio area, and we had this round table facing these two screens, and I had this one chair closest to the TV. I had room. I could get up. I could walk. I could slam the wall. It was great. Everything else was shoulder to shoulder packed. And at one point, this was a very funny moment. Sitting down, and there's a big window behind me, and one of the guys, his name is Ray. He looks, and he says, oh man, I just saw a great omen. We're gonna win this game, right? I'm like, he says, you won't believe this, but right above your shoulder, he's pointing to me, right above your shoulder, there's a building across the street that says the Phoenix on it. And I turned and looked, and sure enough, there it was. And it was one of these kind of meta events that reality just sort of spools out of the event canon. You need to realize in some ways how plastic reality is. Just how plastic it is. I'm telling you, if you ever get disheartened at night, if you're sitting up at night and you're rolling around and sleep, and you're saying, oh my God, there's just too much against us. Just remember how plastic reality is. It's a lot more permeable than you and I understand. And if you set the table consciously, you can perform great magic. And I'm not saying that was great magic. I'm just saying it was interesting. And we had a great time, and we left. And in a weird way, it's catalyzed people's lives. And I don't dishearten them. We got to find inspiration where we can during these very, very lean emotional times and economic times. All right, I'm going to shift the focus here, and I'm actually going to talk about Fukushima a little bit, maybe a lot. I'm going to tell you some things that you don't want to know, but you're going to need to know. And it doesn't matter if you're in the United States or Europe, because Fukushima is there. They have found that the radiation from Fukushima has now circled the planet. So this is from USA Today, and this is very recent. In fact, today. I'm going to read you the story, and then we're going to talk about how ridiculous this is. So this is from Indianapolis, It said thyroid, this is the kind of the subheader. Doctors, here's the headline. Doctors unsure why thyroid cancer cases on the rise. Let me repeat that. Doctors unsure why thyroid cancer cases on the rise. Indianapolis, thyroid cancer, which affects about 11 people per 100,000 each year, seems to be on the rise. It's a trend that baffles medical researchers. Let me repeat that first sentence. Thyroid cancer, which affects 11,000 people per 100,000 each year, seems to be on the rise. It's a trend that baffles medical researchers. Are you kidding me? If a medical researcher had half a brain, it would not baffle them. Or if they had half a soul, it wouldn't baffle them. They would know that we are being exposed to obscene amounts of radiation from Fukushima, which, by the way, is still burning. It is still going on. We're coming up on a year's worth of Fukushima, folks. March 11th, the year anniversary. And they have not entombed that thing. They have not entombed it at all. They're just letting that thing bleed. So the National Cancer Institute statistics suggest that in recent years, the number of cases of this often curable cancer has increased by about 6.5%. Over a decade, that has added up to make thyroid cancer the fastest increasing cancer, says Todd Huntley, an otolaryngologist and head and neck surgeon with the Center for Ear, Nose, Throat, and Allergy in Indianapolis. 10 years ago, if I saw 4 new thyroid cancer patients a year, it would have been a lot, says G. Irene Miner, a radiation oncologist with Indiana University Health Central Cancer Center. Now, sometimes I see that many in a month, and I've seen 3 in a week. Thyroid cancer is more common in women younger than 45, Miner said. Doctors don't know why that's the case. But thyroid problems in general, such as hyper or hypothyroidism, are more common in women. The thyroid helps regulate heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and weight. Thyroid cancer is 3 times more common in women than men. Why is it more prevalent? Experts remain divided on the cause of the increase. Some attribute it to better screening. Many smaller tumors are picked up on ultrasounds or scans done for other reasons, says Michael Moore. I'm not making that up. A head and neck surgeon with Indiana University, Simon Cancer Center. Autopsies conducted on people who died for non-thyroid-related reasons revealed that as many as 80% of the people older than 60 have a thyroid lump or malignancy that went undiagnosed, Moore says. Some think the better screening alone can't explain the increase in thyroid cancer. A recent study showed that the increase is not just in smaller tumors, which might have to do with detection, but also in larger ones, Huntley says. There's definitely something going on, he says. How much is due to increased surveillance and detection, and how much is due to an actual biological change in disease prevalence? We don't know, but we know it's both. Obesity, radiation exposure, and diets low in fruits and vegetables are 3 potential culprits, Huntley says. People who are overweight have a 20% increase in thyroid cancer. Those who are obese have a 53% cancer increase. The more dental x-rays a person has, the higher the risks, studies show. So basically what he's doing, he's saying, okay, well, it could be dental work. It could be, well, you're heavy. It could be, hey, you're not getting enough genetically modified fruits and vegetables. But what he's not saying is, hey, there could be some real environmental risks that we're experiencing. Often thyroid cancer has no symptoms, but is diagnosed when a person or his physician notices a lump in the neck. When symptoms do occur, they can include difficulty swallowing or the sensation of a lump in the throat or voice changes. Amber Skipper, 29, who was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, had felt something in her neck. She thought it was a swollen lymph node. She had been prone to bronchitis and fatigue. She attributed that to being a working mother with 2 small children. When she learned she had cancer, she vowed to fight it. The numbers were on her side. The 5-year survival rate of thyroid cancer is 97%. In October 2010, Skipper of Westfield, Indianapolis, had her thyroid and many lymph nodes removed and underwent treatment with radioactive iodine. She now takes a daily replacement thyroid hormone pill. Yep. Let's take out the thyroid and let's get you on Synthroid. Well, welcome to the synthetic manipulation of the human species. Separated from family because the iodine is radioactive, Skipper had to be isolated from her family for 7 days. She ached to see her 2 young daughters, now 4 and 2, as well as her husband, Ryan, who would leave food outside her door. Argentina's President, Cristina Fernandez, recently had her thyroid removed for what doctors thought was a cancerous nodule. Only after the operation did they decide the mass was not cancerous. Stop right there. Stop right there. My father, when he died, was diagnosed as having liver cancer. But what was interesting was when they did the biopsy, what was surrounding his liver was not cancerous. It was not cancer cells. And they didn't know what it was. And because it didn't line up on their chart, it didn't line up on their flow chart of disease, they couldn't identify it, and they didn't have the time to identify it. It wasn't that important for them to identify it. They thought, well, maybe it's coming from his colon. He did a colonoscopy. Nope, no cancer there. They were going back into his liver for a second biopsy. And that is when the high priest of oncology walked in and waved his hand and said, "You have liver cancer. You are going to die." But through the modern marvel of medicine, you can be temporarily saved. Yes, you have a reprieve. Again, it's temporary, but it's a reprieve. And it's this pill that we've developed. It's the $1,000 cancer pill. And it can extend your life. How long? We don't know. It could be 6 months. It could be a year. It could be 2 years. But it will buy you some precious time. Would you like to try it? And my father, who was jacked up on just about everything they could throw at him because of his high blood pressure, his congestive heart failure. I mean, his body was not his body. By that time, his body belonged to Merck. His body belonged to Pfizer. That's who my father's body belonged. It wasn't his body at that point. And he looked across at my mother and he said, "Yes, I'll take that pill." And that pill facilitated his demise. Let me tell you, man. Once he started taking that pill, he was screwed. My buddy, the captain, who died shortly thereafter, just a couple months after my father, unfortunately, he was given the same pill. And the captain was much more conscious and more presence of mind. He took it one day. He says, "Jesus Christ, I'm not taking this thing. I'm not going to be here long, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to enjoy the time that I have. I'm going to smoke pot. I'm going to eat well. And I'm going to have sex with my wife. And this thing is not going to let me do that." So my father had a mass that they could not identify either. So what does that mean? What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. We're dealing with something new. We're dealing with something different. We're dealing with a whole new, quote unquote, dis-ease. And if you want my opinion, it's coming from chemtrails. It is a highly complex array of phenomena that are literally self-assembling inside us. And doctors have no idea what this is. This is something from another planet. I'm telling you right now. And we all have it to some degree or another. Trust me on this. I know this. So what can you do about it? How can you stay healthy? How can you stay alive in this freaky world? And do you even want to stay alive during these times? And that's another big question. Well, I'll tell you, you're going to have to take care of your thyroid, which means you have to up your dosage of iodine. Here's the fucked up part. Where do we get a lot of iodine from? We get it from kelp and seaweed. And where do we get a lot of our seaweed from? Japan. Okay? You got to rule out Japanese seaweed. Done. You can't have it. Apparently, 68% of the fish that are coming from Japan are filled with radioactivity. Sushi, see you later. Those days are over. If you want to live, forget sushi. If you're going to eat fish at all, I would go with anything from the upper regions of the North Atlantic, anything way up in the North Atlantic, or anything below the equator, maybe Chilean sea bass, because they're in a different loop current. You might be able to get away with having some of those fishes. But fish from the Pacific, don't even think about it. Done. Gone. Fish from the Atlantic, again, unless it's up around Iceland, Nova Scotia, up the upper area of Scotland, I'd stay away from it too. Farm fish, you got a whole other array of issues with farm fish. So you can get seaweed, you can get kelp, you can get it from South America, believe it or not. It does grow there. You can also get it from a place on the East Coast, which has pretty good kelp. May not be as terrible for you as Japanese kelp. Iodine. I would highly recommend that everybody get themselves food-grade iodine and start to take it every day. Just a couple of drops every day. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are amazing for dealing with isotopes. And I'm talking medicinal mushrooms, not magic mushrooms, although those probably aren't bad either. But again, you've got to find really organic reishi and cordyceps, and you got to find the good stuff. And I would get them, again, if you can, from South America or South Africa, someplace like that. Kombucha. Kombucha is another powerful, powerful agent. One of the things that saved a lot of people in Chernobyl was kombucha. Kombucha you can make in your home. You get a kombucha mushroom. You get the mushroom. You cultivate it, and you just drain it, and that's your pet. So kombucha is another way. But if you want to deal with this radiation stuff, that's what you're gonna have to do. And you got to stay away from dairy products. Dairy products are filled with radiation now. I hate to say that. And even some vegetables are filled with radiation. The leafy vegetables, spinach, lettuce, nope. No. Root vegetables, better. Carrots, may get away with a little bit with broccoli, although broccoli can be pretty radioactive. Any of the root vegetables or the tubers are good because they're not exposed. So this is it. This is what we're staring down. This is what we're staring down. So let's get back to our friend, Amber Skipper. So in the years since our operation, Skipper started to eat more organic foods, taking vitamins. Doctors may not be able to tell her why she got cancer, which I completely disagree with, but she wants to make sure she stays healthy. She also decided to become a medical assistant to help others who are sick. Great. She had a life-changing moment. Good for her. And she's alive. Her second iodine isolation, which lasted 2 days, was harder than the first. Her daughters were old enough to miss her. At the end, she got the answer she wanted. She's cancer-free. Says Huntley, if you had to pick a cancer, this is what you would pick. That's the last line in the piece, by the way. If you had to pick a cancer, hey, thyroid's not bad. Just get that sucker removed. Start taking synthetic thyroid. You'll be isolated from your kids for a few days, but you know what? They'll get over it. And look, you'll even get a job when you're done as a medical assistant. So if you had to pick a cancer, hey, thyroid cancer, why not? Cancer's inevitable. Just, surrender, let it go, and hope like hell you get thyroid cancer. Now, what's really interesting is are the comments. Comments are great. Let me just read through the comments. This is Christina Consolo, Auburn Hills, Michigan. She's a top commenter. Doctors are self-absorbed idiots. It's called Fukushima. Protect yourselves, people. They are clueless. If you don't believe me, go to my YouTube channel and listen to a phone call I had with one the other day about this, an OBGYN, clueless. 36 people liked it. Christina Consolo, again, search the top 10 foods highest in potassium and start working those foods into your diets. You can't take PI endlessly, which is potassium iodide. You can paint on the Lugol's without the side effects. Every manufacturer in the U.S. is sold out of potassium iodide anyway. The government probably bought it all up for themselves while the herd gets called. Right on, Christina. Here's Leon R. Pendleton, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. What happened to the President of Argentina happened to my wife back in the early 90s after she'd been Chernobyl. She's from Poland and left shortly after the accident in Chernobyl. Shortly after arriving in Canada, she developed what appeared to be a thyroid cancer. The thyroid was removed and found not to be cancerous. She had a thyroid storm, but is now on a lifetime regime of thyroxine. Melanie Masterson, Fukushima. Margie Nelson, Google chemtrails and thyroid cancer. Some guy with 4 names I'm not about to even try to pronounce. Also read up on fluoride. Christina Consolo, again, medical researchers are baffled. Seriously, they have no business being researchers. Idea Dolly, I agree. I also think this is one of those BS articles. Really, if you get cancer, this is the one to get. Plus, the rates of thyroid disorders are going through the roofs. Cancer is man-made. Think of how much freaking money the big pharma et al. Makes from it. You think they are spewing all this radiation so they can keep cutting us up and giving us outrageous, expensive chemo pills, $250 pill, which is my dead friend had to pay. Yes, don't ever take that pill. Seriously, there is something very sinister about who is ruling our world. People are waking up. Here's T. Real McCoy from Negril, Jamaica. Yeah, it's not the radiation released from nuclear testing, the 6 major nuclear accidents, same problematic radiation that concentrates in the thyroid. It's flu shots, laugh out loud. He's commenting on somebody else. Let's see. Nobody mentioned the new X-ray scanners at the airports. Coincidence? I think not. They do not let your dentist take dental X-rays without a thyroid shield covering your neck. Yep, absolutely. So there we go. People are waking up. It's unfortunate that we have to wake up under these circumstances. But what else is going to wake us up, right? Some level, unless you wake up during the 49er game. It's 10:54. The hour is almost over, and it has been far too fast and far too short. I want to talk a little bit about Martin Luther King before I sign off. Today, we celebrate in the United States the birthday of Martin Luther King. And what I'm about to share with you may be politically incorrect, and hopefully hopefully that can show some sensitivity towards the deceased and his family. But Martin Luther King was educated at a school for socialists and Marxists in Tennessee, along with Rosa Parks. These people were essentially created to lead the civil rights movement in this country. And the whole idea at that time, and again, we're talking when Saturn was in Aquarius, and then to kind of a greater extent, in some ways, in Pisces. This is the time where we have feminism, the women's liberation movement. We also have the civil rights movement. Look, I'm not going to say that there weren't things that needed to be changed. I'm not that regressive. You know, I firmly believe that everybody, and I mean everybody, deserves their inalienable rights. Inalienable rights. And that the civil rights movement, in some ways, was not a bad thing. Having separate water fountains for people to drink in is unacceptable, as far as I'm concerned. But there are different ways that this could have been arrived at, or there are ways it could have been arrived at differently. Okay? It did not necessarily need to be legislated and created. For me, the civil rights movement was like a flash mob. It was the first version of a flash mob. And the result of the civil rights movement, I believe, drove a deeper wedge, in some ways, into race relations than before. What we needed was a dialogue, and we were not getting a dialogue. What we were getting was a war. That's what it was. And Martin Luther King, again, if you aren't entirely familiar with this story, and this is not uncommon, he borrowed many themes of his speeches from other writers and other thinkers, some of which were in the African American rights movement. So he was kind of a plagiarist. And he was also, I hate to say this, but he was also a major philanderer. I mean, Martin Luther King loved women. And he was not all that great to women, I'm going to be honest with you. So we have a clear disconnect between the public persona and the private persona. And yet, the words he spoke were inspired. It changed lives. It gave people some hope to have a dream. And, unfortunately, he was also sacrificed and martyred. So now we have nothing but positive emotions and memories and experiences of Martin Luther King. They are codified and sealed in our consciousness. But what's fascinating for me is that as Martin Luther King has risen every year in greater and greater capacity and in consciousness and awareness, I would say that John F. Kennedy has decreased just as much. John F. Kennedy, is now part of President's Day. Here it was another person that was martyred in their own version. And John F. Kennedy is rarely mentioned anymore, to be honest with you. The whole spectrum of Kennedys being shoved down the memory hole. So, have your own version of a dream. Believe in the name of love. And just like Jim Harbaugh and just like the 49ers, find your inspiration where you can. And perhaps there's something in the life of Martin Luther King that, in spite of the fact that there are huge incongruities, that there is still something there that can inspire you. And find something in this day that you can extract from his life that makes sense to you. Own it. Rewrite history in your own way. Thanks for listening. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step in what's possible. I'll be back on Wednesday, and we will get into the stars. I'll see you then.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.